All right. So hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and I'm just here to introduce Angela. Angela is an educator and activist, and she's going to talk to us about her presentation.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm also an artist.
Yes.
So, okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope this will be an interesting presentation for you. It's a result of my own personal search to know and discover whether it is possible to live in harmony with the earth. So in the mid-1980s, I set out to gain knowledge and experience. I interned at a solar bioshelter in Martha's Vineyard. I immersed myself in Native American tradition and ceremony and began to interview people in all disciplines: psychology, practical ecology, bioregionalism, spirituality, for a book I wanted to put together and share my knowledge and inspiration with others. Among those I interviewed was cultural historian Thomas Berry, and he became an important influence in my life and work for over a decade. As I continued to gather information, the picture began to form that it was indeed possible to live in harmony with the earth. Instead of a book, however, the information I gathered and the experiences I had went into the creation of a 6-week course entitled Eco-Spirituality and Action. The course was broken down into classes exploring the living earth, the cosmology of creativity and humanity's role in the earth system, the mechanics of the creative process applied to daily life, the state of the world, vision and possibility, and group action. An earlier version of this talk was part of the class Vision and Possibility, which was intended to stimulate and inspire students to consider what was theirs to do. It has been said that without vision, the people perish. What is urgently needed is for people to see what's emerging around the world to bring about an ecological civilization, and that is the purpose of this presentation. Often we can't see it because of all the alternative stories and images we are bombarded with constantly, including the censorship in the print and broadcast media. So it is my hope that the information I'm offering here today will spark in you new thoughts and commitment to becoming involved in the great work of our time. And the definition of that is to come shortly. I wanted to preface this by saying that there is so much going on in the world now that it would be impossible to contain all in this presentation. I'm continually revising this presentation and adding to it, so I hope you understand it's by no means exhaustive. Much of what's been presented at this conference could be part of this presentation. And lastly, though I normally talk extemporaneously, there's so much material that I don't want to forget anything, and so I will be reading instead of, I'll be talking too, but reading. Okay, so again, welcome. So the title of this talk is The Great Work of Our Time, Picturing the Ecological Age. History is governed by those overarching movements that give shape and meaning to life, by relating the human venture to the larger destinies of the universe. And that is from The Great Work by Thomas Berry. In his book, The Universe Story, which was co-written by cosmologist Bryant, cultural historian Thomas Berry gave us a historical framework that goes back to the origins of the universe, the beginnings of life, and evolution of consciousness on this planet. It is based on the work of French paleontologist Teilhard de Chardin, who found that matter is evolving towards greater and greater complexity, intelligence, and capacity to love. We are at a point in human history when, as mythologist Joseph Campbell anticipated, a new mythology would arise to synthesize the discoveries of present-day science with a sense of reverence for the ultimate mystery of our existence, while giving the individual a sense of orientation within the universe, in time and space, and a sense of individual and collective purpose. Can everybody hear? Okay. This is another quote by Thomas Berry about individual responsibility and the great work. We all have our particular work. Some of us are teachers, some of us are healers, some of us are farming. We have a variety of occupations. But besides the particular work we do and the particular lives we lead, we have a great work that everyone is involved in and no one is exempt from. The great work before us, the task of moving modern industrial civilization from its present devastating influence on the earth to a more benign mode of presence, is not a role we have chosen. We were chosen by some power beyond ourselves for this historic task. We are, as it were, thrown into existence with a challenge and a role that is beyond any personal choice. The nobility of our lives, however, depends upon the manner in which we come to understand and fulfill our assigned role. So here we have images of the industrial vision. This vision aims to overcome the human condition and the conditions under which life is granted us through the control and subjugation of nature, to create a Disney world where nature is rendered completely unthreatening. It is characterized by increasing violence and exploiting nature as resource for the benefit of humans alone. So here you have the example. That's Dolly in the middle. That's a cloned sheep. Extractive, non-renewable energy sources. The lower left is mountaintop removal. You have deep water drilling. And this guy on the right is better living through chemistry. And most shocking to me of all is the upper right, which is a mechanical replacement of the honeybee. It's industry's response to colony collapse disorder. Behind this vision are certain ideas and principles, some of which are unconscious, that have led us to where we are now. Some of the underlying principles of the technological age or the industrial vision is progress and its endless pursuit, the discontinuity between the human and natural world, anthropocentrism, also called species-centered narcissism by ethnobotanist Terence McKenna, the mechanical universe where nature has no soul, which justifies utilitarianism, meaning nothing has intrinsic worth, only its usefulness to humans, and the endless and unfettered pursuit of profit, now embodied in the tenets of so-called free trade agreements. Berry writes, the entire industrial age is a period of technological entrancement, an altered state of consciousness, a mental fixation that alone can explain how we came to ruin our air, our water, and soil, and to severely damage all our basic life systems. Another word that Thomas Berry uses is the Technozoic age or era. These are more practices of this technological age. It stems, this age has come about from Western civilization's historic quest and belief that it must prevail over nature. Berry uses the term Technozoic to put our moment in Earth history within a geological context. What you see here represents the increasingly extractive practices we are engaged in and their consequences. This represents a use relationship with the planet, not a mutually beneficial one. Conventional wisdom tells us that when you're in a hole to stop digging, yet we continue to dig, literally. So in the upper right, you have contaminated water from Dimock, Pennsylvania, from fracking. It's been found to contain methane, ethane, and other carcinogenic chemicals. To the left of that is these images are painful to me. Tar sands, a strip mining procedure that releases at least 3 times the carbon dioxide emissions as regular oil production, and like hydraulic fracturing, uses quantities of water that can never be replaced. Then, of course, you know, that's the famous picture of the guy lighting his faucet on fire from toxic chemicals from fracking getting into people's water. The Gulf of Mexico, oil blowout. which has devastation to sea life with unknown consequences. And this was my personal tipping point, actually, when that happened several years ago. And I kept watching those video feeds every day, and I got rid of my car, and I take public transportation now. There's a way that you can use carbon offsets. Native Energy is producing wind power so that you can, if you ever are going to use fossil fuels, you can pay them, and it enhances the wind production in Wyoming. Oh, and then that kind of strange-looking pattern there, those are fracking well pads in Wyoming. And now, actually, they have a air quality that is same as LA in parts because of the way the volatile organic chemicals combine with sunlight and create ozone. And of course, then you have the genetic modification of organisms, altering the gene pool for profit. Farmers are unable to sow seeds because they're either contaminated with terminator genes or they're sued for having contaminating crops on their farms. The reason we are finding it hard to stop digging is because we are in the thrall of what Thomas Berry calls a mythic vision. The Technozoic age is a manifestation of what he calls the millennial vision. Some say it began in the 16th and 17th centuries when the notion of an organic, living, and spiritual universe was replaced by that of the world as machine. Others say it goes back to the story of Genesis. Mythic visions, he adds, functions like drug and alcohol addictions. To illustrate this addictive process, we just have to notice what's happening in the oil and gas industry and the continuation of deep water drilling, which is astonishing after the immense destruction in the Gulf of Mexico a few years ago. And just recently in Lake Michigan and in Galveston. Like all addictions, it requires higher and higher doses of the same addictive substance, no matter what the cost. In his book, Green Spirit, 12 Steps in Ecological Spirituality, author Albert LaChance writes, in the same way that an individual addict will resort to mugging in order to protect the vital supply of drugs, so too do we as nations build ever more insane weaponry in order to protect our vital interests globally. What are these vital interests? They are the raw materials of underdeveloped countries. Protecting our vital interests is a polite way of saying that we are willing to mug any country that does not give us a fix. And now the mugging is going on in our own continent for the quest for tar sands and natural gas. Finally, Berry writes in The Dream of the Earth, if the ecological movement has not yet achieved its full efficacy, it's because of the mythic power of the industrial vision. In contrast to the Technozoic age, Berry has proposed an alternative era, what he calls the ecological or ecozoic age. An alternative mythic vision is taking shape in the world today, the ecological vision, which is based on an alternative set of principles which Dr. Jonas Salk, the developer of the polio vaccine, calls pro-evolutionary. That is, principles and ideas that will allow the trajectory of evolution to continue on Earth. In a moment, you will see evidence of the dawning of this ecological age. Whatever vision prevails, however, what is certain is that we are now at the end of the Cenozoic period. The Cenozoic period is the period of the past 65 million years during which the greatest profusion of life on Earth took place. Its end is due entirely to human activity. Some people call this the Anthropocene era because of the unprecedented human influence on Earth's ecosystems over recent centuries. This is an excerpt from the book The Chaos Point by systems scientist Ervin Laszlo. The dominant social order is stressed by radically changed conditions that place in question established values, worldviews, ethics, and aspirations. Society enters a period of ferment. Now the flexibility and creativity of the people create that subtle but all-important fluctuation that decides which of the available paths of development society will hereafter take. Fluctuation in system science refers to a point when a system reaches the limits of stability and turns chaotic. It becomes supersensitive and responsive to small fluctuations. In human society, this means that change in values, beliefs, worldviews, and aspirations of its members can now have an enormous impact. He believes that we are in that period now, in which the future of this planet will be decided. He wrote, "Within the next 3 years, society will either resist change and devolve or break down into conflict, violence, and environmental destruction, or evolve into breakthrough in which the mindset of a critical mass of people evolves in time to shift human behavior toward a more sustainable mode." The window he proposed has now passed. This book was written in 2006. Some say, like oceanographer Sylvia Earle, that the critical period is the next 10 years. It's not a precise science projecting the victory of sanity over the human race. But Martin Luther King said that all you need is 10% of the populace to be converted. That is a number for critical mass. So, Thomas Berry often said we live in heroic times. The hero's journey is a process that is at work at both the individual and planetary level. In Jungian terms, maturity and coming to wholeness involves the gradual integration and unification of the self through the resolution of successful layers of psychological conflict. In Teilhard de Chardin's terms, the universe and the earth is our larger self. If we take our planet and the universe to be various components of the whole, our larger self, then we are attempting to integrate these into our sense of who we are. We are becoming whole, unified, indivisible, a mature species in right relationship with other species. Duane Elgin also calls it moving out of adolescence into adulthood. The Great Turning is a name for the transition from the industrial growth society to a life-sustaining society. It identifies the shift from a self-destroying political economy to one in harmony with the earth and enduring for the future. It unites and includes all actions being taken to honor and preserve life on earth. It is the essential adventure of our time, And this is from Joanna Macy, who is a Buddhist scholar and system scientist. And the Great Turning is Joanna's way of defining our moment, which is the decision window given by Laszlo, and it's happening right now. To quote Thomas Berry again, "This larger vision is no longer utopian. It directly concerns the hardest, most absolute reality there is, the reality of the water we drink, the air we breathe, and the food we eat." Joanna Macy likes to use the image of a flower representing a life-sustaining society growing right up out through the rubble of industrial growth society. Some of the principles of the ecological age are inclusivity, unity and diversity, non-zero-sum games, which means win-win scenarios, choice, people power, holism, the organismic model, sustainability meaning satisfying needs without jeopardizing the prospects of future generations. That is the most concise definition of sustainability I've heard, and I'll repeat it. Sustainability means satisfying needs without jeopardizing the prospects of future generations. So now we're going to see some signs of a world awakening. This is a quote from Willis Harman, who wrote Global Mind Change. "Something as quiet as a change of mind is bubbling up, spreading around the world, changing everything." There are no charismatic leaders of this movement. It's spontaneous. It consists of scientists and human rights activists, indigenous people, people of faith, steel workers and farmers, parents and forest activists, environmentalists, social justice workers, students, teachers, architects, and artists. The subtle but all-important fluctuation that Laszlo describes can be observed in the U.S. alone among what's being called the cultural creatives, a segment of about 1/4 of the adult population in the United States. That's 50 million people. a new energy is beginning to appear. More than 1 million groups are engaged right now all over the planet to bring about social change. We'll be looking at some of those individuals and movements in a moment. So now we're going to frame the rest of the talk in terms of these four aspects of transition from the industrial age to a life-sustaining society. They're the confrontational, the legislative, the creative, and consciousness changing. So the following slides depict some of the trends now taking hold using these four approaches. And as I said, this is by no means an exhaustive treatment of the subject. So first we're going to go to the confrontational approach. This woman is Julia Butterfly Hill. Maybe some of you know of her. She spent 2 years in an old-growth tree to prevent loggers from cutting it down. She endured freezing rain, napalm, and threats from the loggers, but she did not come down until there was an agreement that the tree would be preserved. Her account of her experience is in her book, The Legacy of Luna, and Luna is the name she gave to the tree. And here we have Earth First and Greenpeace, who are probably well known to everybody here. Earth First activists have staged many confrontations in which they use their own bodies to block actions that threaten critical ecosystems. Here on the right, they're blocking a coal truck from entering the 50-year-old Clinch River coal-fired electric power plant that emits millions of pounds of pollutants every year. Earth First is an international environmental action movement focused on protecting wild nature. Recent action by Greenpeace is last summer, you may have seen it in the news, 6 activists occupied a Russian oil rig to protest drilling in the Arctic. Greenpeace's executive director and other activists were hosed by the rig's crew in an effort to thwart their protest. And they were held, I don't know, for about 6 months. Maybe somebody knows, but it's quite a long time. Greenpeace is promoting a resolution in the UN General Assembly now that would protect Arctic region from any drilling or unsustainable fishing. And the Chipko Movement, which grew in the 1970s and 80s, is a resistance to the destruction of forest throughout rural India and became organized and known as the Chipko Movement. The name Chipko comes from the word meaning embrace. In this movement, villagers in India, mostly women, put their arms around trees in order to save them from the contractors' axes who came to cut them down for commerce and industry. The forests are a critical resource for the subsistence of rural peoples in India, especially in hill and mountain areas, both because of their direct provision of food and fuel and because of their role in stabilizing soil and water sources. And many of you probably know of Tim DeChristopher, who in 2008, when he was a University of Utah student, registered as a buyer in the oil and gas lease auction of 22,500 acres of public lands around the Arches and Canyonlands National Parks. Without having the money or intention of buying or developing them, he outbid oil companies on the parcels and saved those irreplaceable lands from oil and gas exploitation. He was, however, sentenced to 2 years in prison, although he did raise the money to cover the leases. That fact was not allowed to be part of his defense. He's become a symbol of the movement of confrontational approaches to safeguard the environment. And the Sea Shepherd, this group uses direct action tactics to protect sea life and was founded by Paul Watson. Their actions have gone up against Canadian seal hunting in the Gulf of St. Lawrence and whaling, where it has attempted to intervene against Russian, Spanish, Norwegian, Icelandic, and Japanese whalers in multiple campaigns around the world. In the 1990s, they changed their strategy and have started ascribing themselves law enforcement powers, using their interpretation of maritime and conservation law to pursue their aims as an anti-poaching agency. Big Life Foundation is founded by photographer Nick Grant. Maybe some of you know of this. This is really powerful stuff. The annual species extinction rate, estimated to be somewhere between 20 and 30,000 per year, or between 50 and 80 species per day, is 1,000 times the natural rate. Based on these statistics, biologist E.O. Wilson estimates that if current trends continue, half of Earth's annual animal and plant species will be extinct by the end of this century. The magnificent large animals, the gorilla, elephant, Siberian tiger, are all expected to be extinct in the wild by mid-century. The Big Life Foundation estimates that there will be no elephants or lions left in the African wilds within 15 years. So within just 4 years of its inception, the Big Life Foundation has placed and equipped teams of rangers in newly built outposts in the most critical, vulnerable areas throughout the region of the Amboseli ecosystem in Tanzania and Kenya. They've acquired 315 rangers across 2 countries. These are some of the rangers. 31 ranger outposts, 15 anti-poaching vehicles, aerial support and monitoring, 4 tracker dogs, which are vital to operations, 2 for each country, the latest technology and night vision equipment, and other necessary equipment for the ranger teams. Poachers are now operating at night because, you know, there's more surveillance during the day, which is a good thing, and a large network of informers. And since 2010, the foundation has made 1,030 arrests and confiscated 3,012 weapons. And I highly recommend that you go to their website, the Big Life Foundation, to find out more. They're doing tremendous work. Back in the U.S., these are all recent. I guess it was, well, I'm just going to say it was recent. On the upper left-hand side, Sandra Steingraber and 10 fellow residents of the Seneca Lake region blockaded the gate of a gas compressor station on Seneca Lake. The Finger Lakes region is renowned for its natural beauty, vineyards, tourism, and agricultural-based economy, and is endangered by heavy industrialization from the infrastructure from the fracking industry. All of them were arrested and charged with trespassing. Sandra chose the jail sentence to paying a fine. And if you haven't seen the interview with Bill Moyers on the night before she went to jail, you can see it online. It's really tremendous. This speaks to a very urgent local issue of gas exploration and infrastructure in New York State that's dispossessing people, polluting water in Pennsylvania, and dividing communities. And then to the right, calling tar sands development a project of total destruction, members of the Nez Perce tribe placed their bodies before a megaload of extraction equipment making its way along Idaho's Highway 12 to the Alberta tar sands. And beneath that is a former Exxon employee turned climate activist in Winsboro, Texas, who locked himself to the Keystone XL clear-cutting machinery. And to the left of that is, you know, right in Manhattan, a member of Occupy the Pipeline temporarily stopped construction of the Spectra pipeline in New York City in the West Village. So just for general knowledge, there is a group called Training for Change in Philadelphia that is training people in strategic action now. So it's their next workshop is Beyond Marches and Rallies, Building Power Through Strategic Tactics. The book Doing Democracy is a fantastic primer. It describes the progression of successful social movements, and it's a very important book. So now we're going to move towards the legislative approach. And the legislative approach, you have state, national, and international legislative initiatives, carbon cap legislation, community environmental legal defense fund, the Nature Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, several international treaties, including the Cochabamba Protocol, and of course the Earth Charter. And there's also litigation. That's right. No, I'm sorry, I'm going to move back. Just a word about carbon tax legislation. That's versus cap and trade. Carbon taxes are preferable to carbon cap and trade systems for a number of reasons. Carbon taxes can be implemented with far less opportunity for manipulation by special interests. Energy prices will be predictable with a carbon tax. Carbon taxes can be implemented much faster than complex cap and trade systems. Carbon taxes are transparent and easily understandable. They address emissions of carbon from every sector, not just the electrical industry. Carbon tax revenues can be returned to the public. The Cochabamba Protocol, which was drafted in 2010 in Cochabamba, Bolivia, in response to the UN, Kyoto, and Copenhagen climate summits. Outside groups such as the Cochabamba Declaration and the World People's Conference on Climate Change and the Rights of Mother Earth. The protocol recognizes Mother Earth as a living being with whom we have an indivisible, interdependent, complementary, and spiritual relationship. Some of the rights claimed for the Earth and its life in the document are the right to live and to exist, to be respected, to regenerate its biocapacity, and to continue its vital cycles and processes free of human alteration. The right to maintain their integrity and identity as differentiated beings, the right to water as a source of life, the right to clean air, the right to be free of contamination and pollution, free of toxic and radioactive waste, the right to be free of alterations or modifications of its genetic structure in a manner that threatens its integrity or vital and healthy functioning. And the Ecuadorian Constitution grants nature rights. Natural communities and ecosystems possess the inalienable right to exist, flourish, and evolve within Ecuador. This is quoting from the Constitution. Those rights shall be self-executing, and it shall be the duty and right of all Ecuadorian governments, communities, and individuals to enforce those rights. Some of you may know of the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, which has assisted more than 150 communities across the country to establish community rights ordinances that today are protecting communities from a range of harmful practices, from shale gas drilling and fracking to the land application of sewage sludge. And the Nature Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, drafted by a Quaker environmentalist by the name of Marshall Massey. I'll just read the first section. Section 1. No action, policy, or pattern of neglect shall be taken or permitted by the United States or any state which would have a significant and adverse effect on A, the atmosphere, water, soils, or other physical resources on which life depends, B, on the integrity, diversity, or continuing viability of plant or animal species of known or potential direct or indirect value to humanity, or C, on the integrity, diversity, or continuing viability of a wild ecosystem. Nobody's sponsored this this amendment yet, but I think it's an important step to formulate it. And of course, the Earth Charter of the United Nations, which draws upon principles of respect and care for the community of life, ecological integrity, social and economic justice, democracy, nonviolence, and peace. So now I wanted to go to this slide where litigation is also being used. In particular, the Center for Biological Diversity that's using the Endangered Species Act to safeguard habitat. they've been very successful in this country. Earth Justice has been engaged in tar sands lawsuits, and Riverkeeper, along with a number of other groups, sued the Army Corps of Engineers to prevent drilling for natural gas in the Delaware River Basin without first conducting an environmental impact analysis. So now we're going to move on from the legislative and the confrontational to the creative approach. The creative approach is characterized by actions that do not wait for laws to be changed. The following examples are of those people going out and creating an alternative reality. Appropriate technologies. We must create human technologies that are coherent with Earth technology so that humans can be present to the Earth in a mutually enhancing, mutually beneficial manner. Humans would thus benefit from the integral Earth process, the Earth's fruitfulness, and humans would simultaneously enhance the Earth in return in terms of art, architecture, dance, and music, the celebratory dimension of the Earth, which throughout humankind celebrates itself. And I just want you to know, if you know this is going too fast and you want to copy some of this down, this is all going to be on the internet, so you'll have it there. Great. So the first example is straw bale construction, which insulates properties, has an aesthetic component to it that really is unparalleled, using local materials, and you don't cut trees down. Very high R value, and it's adaptable to many climates, and it's low cost. So here are some friends in Crestone, Colorado. Actually, the guy on the left is an architect by the name of John Warden. And he actually, on the right, you can see that's a straw bale home, and it's a two-story straw bale home, which, if you know from architecture, it's very unusual to have a straw bale home with load-bearing walls and 2 stories. So it's quite nice. Earth chips. Using recycled materials. This is also in Crestone, Colorado, where I used to live. You can see they use aluminum cans, all to glass bottles, tires, burning to the north, southern exposure, so it's all to capture the heat of the sun, and then it radiates out at night. The Green Building at Friends Committee on National Legislation in Washington, D.C. So here, this is their headquarters, and an example of appropriate technology in green building, and living in right relationship with the Earth. They use switchgrass on the rooftop, which maintains coolness and controls water flow. There's geothermal energy installed, bamboo floors, recycled materials for carpets and furniture. Oh, okay, here's the some massive projects in New York City. Some of you may be familiar with them. The Solaire at One Bryant Park, and they're LEED certified, which is certified by the United States Green Building Council, featuring sustainable site development, water savings, energy efficiency, materials selection, indoor environmental quality. And I just have to say that there's still some controversy on the nature of the materials, and that there's some outgassing going on with those. This is one of my favorites, living machines. This is pioneered by John and Nancy Todd at the New Alchemy Institute, where aquatic plants and fish are set up as filters for water. This is the waste is food principle. There's one in operation at the Darrow School in New Lebanon, New York, and in the municipality of Providence, Rhode Island. So they take sewage water, run it through these natural systems, and at the end of the process you have drinking water. It's fabulous. These are photographs from Solviva Bioshelter, where I interned for 6 weeks. And it's the foundation of my confidence that we can live in harmony with the earth. I learned that not only could we live in harmony with the planet without polluting her, but that it could be beautiful and comfortable and healthy. This is the answer to anyone who fears living lightly on the earth means freezing in the dark. So you've got like the bunnies down there that she had inside the greenhouse that put out 8 BTUs per pound. So it increased the heat. It increased the carbon dioxide, you know, inside the greenhouse, which enhanced the plant growth. Compost from the animal manure went back into the soil. Delightfully clean air from the presence of plants. She invented something called an earth lung, where it was a pump that was activated by solar energy that took the ammonia out of the air and rerouted it underneath the growing beds, which fertilized the soil and made the plants grow better. And she's really something. And I'm going to she has a couple of books out that I'll be talking about later. Of course, there's urban farming, composting, and green markets. My own journey from living in the country and intensive gardening to coming back to New York City has led me to a new appreciation of urban living as a substantial way to reduce our carbon footprint. One study claims that carbon emissions of city dwellers are 70% less than those living in rural or suburban areas. When you add urban farming to the mix, greenhouse gas emissions are radically reduced. So we have an example. This big cylindrical thing, I don't know that that's built. I think that's probably some kind of prototype, some drawing, but it's certainly, you know, the next thing that's coming in the city. And of course we've got green markets, which keep our production local. Community-supported agriculture, probably people know about this, where you can buy shares. Lower cost to the consumer, helps farmer with startup costs, healthy, locally grown non-toxic food, and it enhances community. Intentional communities is where a lot of these innovations can get implemented easily, because it's on private land and they're not depending on local ordinances. Plus, they share resources and services, provide community nurturing employment outside the corporate structure. So these are two intentional communities that I've had some experience with. On the right, Earth Haven Eco Village in North Carolina was founded in 1994. It's located on 320 acres, about 40 minutes from Asheville, North Carolina. Their website says, we're dedicated to caring for people and the earth by learning and demonstrating a holistic, sustainable culture. I visited there a few years ago, where my friend Diana Christian lives, who is one of the co-founders. They also offer publication, homeschooling, permaculture, vegetables and herbs for the community and larger community, and workshops in green building, etc. Heartwood Co-housing in Bayfield, Colorado, is modeled after the co-housing model created in Denmark in the 1970s and was introduced to the United States in the 1980s. There are now hundreds of co-housing communities in the U.S., either already built or under development. Co-housing neighborhoods are usually designed in clusters to foster community and cooperation while preserving open space. Co-housing residents each own a private home on a private lot while sharing a great many amenities. At Heartwood, where I lived a few years ago, the residents share a common house, greenhouse, community garden, a workshop, a yurt, a hen house, a hot tub, tractor, tennis court, and 250 acres of open space. Many of the homes are either straw bale or passive solar. And of course, there's renewable energy, which is just growing by leaps and bounds all the time. Biodiesel, tidal, wind, and solar. Wind energy is available in cities now. Ethical Energy and Pear Energy, you may know, are two companies that we can use right here in the city that provide electrical energy from wind and solar, 100%. Wind energy is being produced on Indian reservations. Tidal power is huge in Denmark and the Netherlands, and there's even a project in the East River, a tidal project. As for biodiesel, switchgrass has the lowest maintenance and water requirements, so it's better than sugar beets or corn. According to Bloomberg, not the ex-mayor, strong growth for renewables is expected through 2030. Market statistics show continued expansions of the wind power market with an annual growth of almost 10% and cumulative capacity growth of about 19%. And related to this is community-supported renewable energy, which are run like energy co-ops. Again, the best examples are in Denmark. Wind installations are composed of small groups or clusters of mid-sized turbines, not the huge wind farms that you find in the United States. And these Danish wind turbines are operated by farmers, homeowners, and small businesses, either independently or more frequently as cooperative ventures. There are community energy projects using biogas, hydropower, and solar in the United States and Canada, including Minnesota, Greenfield, Massachusetts, North Carolina, Burlington, Vermont, and Toronto. Each region in the U.S. has an abundance of energy: hydropower in the northwest, offshore wind in the northeast, solar energy in the southwest, and biomass from forests in the southeast. And there's also carbon sequestering. And this is some really amazing technology where you have a company, Greenfield Technologies Corporation, pioneered the development of an algae bioreactor technology to convert the CO2 in industrial smokestack gases into clean, renewable biofuels. Algae-based biodiesel fuel can also be used in cars and has just been used to fuel the Bullet 580, which is a 230-foot by 65-foot blimp that can transport payloads at 35 miles an hour. The airship can carry payloads of up to 2,000 pounds to 20,000 feet. I've not included geoengineering carbon sequestering projects because tampering with carbon on this scale is highly unpredictable and unnecessary if we implement these forms of soft technology. Another form of soft technology is tree planting. Volunteers of Kenya's Green Belt movement, spearheaded by Nobel laureate Wangari Maathai, have planted some 20 million trees, which takes the CO2 out of the atmosphere. And an example of, so this is all soft technology, an example of hard technology is, actually the terms hard and soft technology were coined by Amory Lovins. And an example of hard technology is nuclear energy, which he likens to using a chainsaw to cut a stick of butter. Okay. Here's a little cute thing. Compressed air technology. It goes 125 miles on compressed air with a plug-in compressor. There's also the Nissan Leaf, which runs 100 miles on fully charged batteries, which is 80% less operating costs. We have the Transition Town movement, and it's to equip communities for the dual challenges of climate change and peak oil. The movement currently has member communities in over 100 communities recognized as official transition towns in the UK, Ireland, Australia, Italy, Chile, and the United States. Over 50 towns in New Zealand are using the transition town process. I know of ones in Boulder and Manchester, Vermont. We don't have one in New York City, so might be something to get started. And so, you know, I'm not going to read through all this, but you can see it on the internet if you want to get the details. Local economies and barter systems. The importance of these is to, as Bill McKibben explained, the main reasons are twofold. Our ever-growing globe-spanning economy is increasingly vulnerable to the ecological disruption it is causing, with global warming the prime example. And despite record affluence, Americans report ever-growing feelings of disconnection and loss of community, trends that can only be reversed if we manage to rebuild local institutions that draw people together. So in the Berkshires, they have a currency called the Berkshires, which is designed for use in the southern Berkshire region of Massachusetts. And you could get them at the bank. It supports local businesses and keeps capital in the local area. So I included this slide because it really is very telling. On the sources from the Cloud Institute for Sustainability Education, you may know of them, they're in the city, that on the left, what's you know, part of the this is all the GDP and treats all of these as economic gain. And, you know, manufacturing, okay, housing, sales, food production. Then you get into disease and medical, pollution, the creation of it and cleanup, crime, prisons, lock, security, divorce, natural disasters, war and terrorism. There's no incentive to eradicate them because they're moneymakers. On the contrary, the motivation is clearly to create more. And so the GDP also treats the depletion of natural capital as income. So you know, what's the solution? I mean, some people have coined the term voluntary simplicity. It's a growing movement of people who've realized happiness and fulfillment do not lie in having more money or new and bigger things, but rather in the time spent with loved ones and in connection with community. They're questioning the consumer society's insistence that possessions, especially of the newest design and color, are the means of fulfillment. The book on the left, Your Money or Your Life, and Self-Guided Course helps people to define their values and establish a new relationship to money. And this person on the bottom here is Jim Merkel, who is a former military engineer who lives in Vermont and has designed a life that only costs $5,000 a year. He's pretty handy, too. Okay, now we're going to move on to consciousness changing. This is in addition to the other three that we've been looking at, and this is Joanna Macy's contribution to the three categories. And the three, you know, the legislative, the confrontational, and the creative are only what I would say. I mean, they're fabulous, but it's kind of like putting your finger in the dike. Unless you change consciousness, which then changes law, which then, you know, people are motivated. You're only, you know, holding back the deluge. So what we're going to look at now is rather than keeping the destruction at bay, this is the movement where these are useful aids in the effort to change consciousness. So these are some books which I highly recommend. Some of you might be familiar with some of these. One of the ones that I like to highlight is the one by Joanna Macy up on the upper right, second to the right, in Coming Back to Life, and it deals with, it helps people deal with the grief that we feel in acknowledging what's happening to the planet. so that you can kind of come out the other side and join with others to do things, to make change. Yeah, and then there's a lot of great reading here. These are, this is the new book by Anna Edie. She was the woman that I told you about that had the solar bioshelter. It's called Green Light at the End of the Tunnel. It's comprehensive. The chapters are wastewater management, heating, food production, electricity, transportation, and solid waste. It's profusely illustrated and compiles a lot of what's in this talk. It's hot off the press, and I had a copy to bring into you, but it's a little heavy, so I didn't bring it, but you can ask me later, and I'll tell you how to get it. But you can see here, like, here's just one page, people power, and she's also a visual artist, so whenever she wants to, you know, convey her vision, she's either drawing it or she gets these images where here people are creating electricity by being on their, you know, being in their gyms, on their bicycles, doing spinning. And Solviva is really, that's the name of the bioshelter where I was. It's also a wonderful, wonderful book. Websites and publications. Wiser Earth is a website and social network for sustainability where you can connect with thousands of groups working for social change. There's Yes Magazine, which empowers people with the vision and tools to create a healthy planet and vibrant communities with a highly informative and inspiring articles. And then, of course, there's ecological learning centers and curricula. Just a few examples of Yes Tomorrow in Vermont. The Farm in Tennessee offers courses in permaculture design certification, midwifery, eco-village training. There's Genesis Farm, where I've spent quite a bit of time in their earth literacy program. They also teach the new cosmology, vegetarian cooking, foraging, cooking with local foods. And the Cloud Institute, which equips school systems K through 12 and their communities with core content, skills, and habits of mind that create education for a sustainable future. I've taken some of their workshops, and they're very powerful. And of course, there's, you know, what's going on here at the Center for Sustainable Design Strategies right here at Pratt. Then, you know, using new media, you probably are, everyone here is aware of 350.org. These are photographs from October 2009, when they organized the most widespread day of political action in history, over 5,200 events in 181 countries, to call for a clear solution to the climate crisis, reducing the level of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere below 350 parts per million. They're now focused on preventing the XL pipeline that would deliver tar sands oil to the U.S. and are involved in civil disobedience. And this slide is about consciousness raising, not necessarily changing, because we have very little broadcast media independent of corporate control, which I see as willfully blocking this spread of critical information. In general systems theory, we are being deprived of what's called input transducers, which means that the sensory receptors for information coming from the outside. In terms of human society, that means news and scientific research. A healthy system needs the free flow of information so that it can make proper choices for its own health. Documentaries have sprung up in the last 12 years to fill in this void. We have yet to see a television network that expresses the views of global civil society rather than the interests of global corporate structure. So here you just have a smattering of some really great documentaries, and Inconvenient Truth, I think, really, you know, really kind of galvanized the entire world. GASLAND has to do with fracking all over the United States. plastic planet is a mind blower. To see, the prevalence of plastic in our bloodstream, not to mention in the oceans. And Indian Point by Rory Kennedy came out a few years ago and talked about what would happen if one of the planes that had hit the trade towers had actually hit Indian Point nuclear facility, which is 35 miles from Manhattan. And of course, there's Democracy Now!, which is independent news program and is broadcast on Pacifica, NPR, community and college radio stations on public access, including CUNY-TV, PBS, and satellite television. And Living Downstream is another really wonderful documentary that's based on the life of Sandra Steingraber. She's the lady that got arrested. But anyway, so now we're going to go into ceremony and celebration. More of the consciousness changing. So maybe some of you have actually experienced the winter solstice celebration at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, celebrating a point in Earth's movement around the sun. This is called the Universe Walk, where each participant starts at the center, at the beginning of creation, and you trace the spiral around. It's the journey of the universe as your own, so that when you're at the beginning, it is the creation of primal energy, the eruption of primal energy, and then there's the formation of elementary particles, and you experience it as your own evolution. So there's you could see there's like little stations where you can read, what's happening, where the Earth is formed, the photosynthesis has begun, where human life emerged, and then you kind of come out at the end, and you traced your entire development. And it's, again, very powerful. This is a Buddhist ritual called Touching the Earth for Ecological Regeneration. I'll just read a portion of it. Touching the Earth, I open myself to this beautiful planet and all of the life that is here. With heart and mind open, I see that there is no separation between my body and the body of the Earth. Every mineral in this flesh and bone has been stone and soil, and it will be again. Looking into one calcium molecule in my bone, I see that it used to be part of the body of a green leaf. Before that, it was part of the living soil in a garden. Long before that, it was the shell in the sea. I see the continuation of this calcium molecule in so many forms, and now in my own bone. I can see that the earth element in me will return to the soil and manifest as other forms of life in the future. And this is another ritual called the Council of All Beings, where not just children, but people of all ages have an opportunity to put on the identity of an animal or a plant or an ecosystem, and from that point of view, express their concerns, grief, and pleas to the human world. Again, it's very powerful to kind of get out of your own identity and do this. And these are traditional earth-based ceremonies. Ritual has been a constant presence with human beings. Traditional ceremonies connected the person with nature, again, usually through an ordeal, including physical suffering, deprivation, and isolation. Represented here are the North American sun dance. That's the on the lower right. The sweat lodge, and the Aboriginal walkabout. I include them here because the first peoples never lost touch with their need for ceremony and connection to the earth, and they continue to be observed up to the present time. Western civilization has much to learn from these cultures and their rituals, which can help to reclaim the intimacy with nature we have lost. And for me, the Sweat Lodge is the most powerful and transformative ceremony I've ever experienced. And if you ever have the chance to participate, I highly recommend it. It's life-changing. And these are what I'm calling the new storytellers. Many ideas have come before us about who we are, where we come from, and where we're going. The Technozoic myth tells us we're consumers. According to the new story of the universe, we are the conscious dimension of the earth. It tells us that evolution is the ongoing creative process of the entire universe, and that by extension, we too are creative. On the upper left, Jennifer Morgan has written a series of books for children introducing them to this new story of the universe, and tells the story to groups of adults and children as the universe. She tells it in the first person as the universe. Miriam McGillis in the center, who founded Genesis Farm, of which I spoke earlier. And Brian Swim in the lower left, who collaborated with Mary Evelyn Tucker on creating the film Journey of the Universe, which tells the epic story of cosmic, earth, and human transformation. And on the right is Thomas Berry, who passed away in 2009. And the upper right-hand side is watercolors by Mary Coelho. She's attempting to articulate the new story of the universe through her watercolors. So now we have a real treat. This is the Emergent Universe Oratorio, which is an hour-and-a-half long choral and chamber orchestra piece by composer Sam Guarnaccio, accompanied by paintings by Cameron Davis. This is the first composition of its kind, and I hope you get to experience it. There's an effort now underway to bring it to New York City and to Princeton. So here's a clip. I hope it works. Okay. So what they're singing is Earth Rise, Amen. And so, you know, you picture the Earth, the picture the astronauts had of the Earth when the Apollo crews took pictures. And this is a wonderful performance piece by Dominique Mazot in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Once a month for 7 years, she walked the river's bed, the Rio Grande, and its banks, doing a literal and symbolic cleansing. And the name of her piece is called The Great Cleansing of the Rio Grande. She says the deep listening portion was as important as the collection of found objects, which recorded the event and were shown in installations. Her performance piece brought people's awareness to the issue of pollution of the river while marrying art, ritual, prayer, and activism. Some of my favorite art using the environment as a main material. Andy Goldsworthy. that's an open skylight at the Live Oaks Friends Meeting House in Houston, Texas by James Turrell. And next we're going to have a clip of a DVD from my own work that's in the Smithsonian Institution. Sit back and enjoy. And following are some other images in that same collection called Conscious Evolution, The World at One. This is called A Star's Way, and the caption at the bottom of the painting is, "Matter has reached a point of beginning to know itself. Man is a star's way of knowing about stars." This piece is called Discovering Fire. It's also in the same series. And it was inspired by Teilhard de Chardin, whose quote is at the bottom: "Someday, after we have mastered the wind, the tides, and gravity, we will harness the energies of love, and then for the second time in history, man will have discovered fire." Just say that the image is a little distorted. It's a little, too wide. But anyway, the idea. This is a series called All My Relations, which is this is also my work, which is a Native American prayer and salutation. I created this when I was attending a lot of ceremonies on the Southern Ute Reservation and Lakota reservations. And just as I was beginning to practice traditional Byzantine Russian iconography. I created this contemporary icon because I felt something was missing from the collection of images from the traditional iconography I was practicing. After all, even the prophets and saints are derivative of the earth. This is done in the same materials and liturgical method that traditional icons are done. And this is another iteration of the same image called the Earthly Paradise, icon of the third millennium. This piece is called Epiphany, and it's inspired by the shuttle astronauts' accounts of seeing the Earth from near orbit. So now I'm going to leave you with some inspirational quotes. The first one is from Martha Graham. There is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all of time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, the world will not have it. So don't block it. It's from E.F. Schumacher. We must do what we conceive to be the right thing and not bother our heads or burden our souls with whether we will be successful. Because if we don't do the right thing, we will be doing the wrong thing, and we will just be part of the disease and not part of the cure. This quote is called Transcendence from the Path of Least Resistance by Robert Fritz. You might be thinking that the factors that have been prevalent in your life up to this point are so powerful, have created such momentum, have existed for such a long time, and are so overwhelming that there's very little you can do because of it. Change is possible, but it can only come when it is rooted in the service of that which you most deeply care about, and not whether you are trying to solve life. In each individual on this planet, there is the deepest longing to reunite with what is highest in them. At this moment in our history, a new door is opening into an era of motivated by vision, energized by aspiration, rooted in current reality, being forged by each creative act and leading to a transcendence of civilization as a whole. And this is one of my favorite quotes from Teilhard de Chardin. Everywhere on earth, in this moment, in the new spiritual atmosphere created by the idea of evolution, there float, in a state of extreme mutual sensitivity, love of God and faith in the world, the two essential components of the ultra-human. These two components are everywhere in the air. Sooner or later, there will be a chain reaction. And this is from Theodore Roszak, who is an eco-psychologist in California. The strongest emotion is love. Can we begin to love each other, love our visions, love ourselves so intensely, so passionately, that the power of love is transformed into new realities? And I'll just end with this quote from Thomas Berry's vision of the ecological age. A luxuriant earth community, mutually enhancing in all its layers and levels of life and being, where the minds of the universe are safeguarded and nurtured, where the creativity of each nation, of every species, is energized for the total vibrancy and joy of the whole community of beings. Thank you. So, do we have any questions or answers?
I have a question.
Yeah.
This relates to your practice as an artist and what you're attempting to communicate intentionally wanting to communicate, right? How much are you thinking of particular audience with that? How much are you attempting to explicitly convey some of the goals and the values that you present your us today?
Well, thank you for that question. The art speaks for itself, but it's not enough. And so that's why originally I was creating, I don't know, did you come in a little late? Because I was talking about the fact that after I'd done all this research, I wanted to put together an anthology. And what I did was I went around interviewing people who had answers that talked about the principles and practices of a sustainable human presence on the planet. But it never got published. And so I turned it into a course, and then I extracted this out of it. But yes, it definitely needs more articulation. So the thing is, with the book, things are changing so rapidly that it would have to be some other form, and I'm like digitally like clueless. So, and I know a lot of people here are, very adept at that kind of stuff, and I would love to develop something, maybe to go on the internet where, I could disseminate those kinds of ideas, in maybe like a course. I know some people are doing stuff like this now. You have a course over several weeks, and it's interactive. So I think that's the way it has to be now, because book, it's obsolete by the time it comes out. So. No, this is. Here, I can pass this around. This is done in egg temper and gold on wood. So that particular one is done with the same materials that traditional icons are made from. So I use a lot of different media, mixed media using photography, pastel. Yeah, if you go to my website, you'll see a lot. I have a card there. You can check it out.
Whether you have been able to see this guy's face.
No, but have you seen it already? Mm-hmm. Have you seen this guy? Have you?
I'm able to at Rice University as well. Outside. And I haven't been able. I have a friend who lives in Houston, and like that's like. I just think it's that aspect of me. I'm not an artist. I'm a designer, but environmental art.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
No, I've met him, but I never.
It is the most incredible space to be in, and as the walls change, you just become part. It becomes a part of you, and you really recognize your oneness. It
Bye-bye.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Okay, well, that looks like it. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. All right, Ernie. She got it.
Would you like some water?
Yeah, great. Oh, that's right. We have to unhook me. Oh, it's nice to meet you. Oh my gosh! All right. Well, why don't you give me